There's a strange phenomenon that happens in the most remote areas of the world. When you get out there, you see houses, and these houses have names. Some people even believe that these houses have personalities. That sounds a little strange, doesn't it? Well, it did for me too. But next time you're in the countryside, whether it be in America, France, England, Ireland, any of these areas, look at the houses. See for yourself. These houses have names. And if you're like me, maybe sometimes you wonder about it and then quickly forget. Well, today we're doing a deep dive and we're going to look into what is with these weird house names. Stick around. Real quick, if you're new here, my name is Steve and I aim to live life through its most simple, purest form. To do this, I try to understand history, simple living, minimalism, and anything else that could potentially lead me to understanding what it means to live in a pure, simple form. And that's what we're trying to do here. So if you like that idea, stick around. Anyway, let's get back to talking about houses. So the first time I ever experienced the naming of houses, or at least noticed, was a couple of years ago when I was in France. We were up in the Alps and we were driving up the mountain. And I looked over and I noticed that every single house that we passed had a name badge on it. And I started to read the names. Some of them were like Mountain Meadow or Bluebells, or I can't even remember them all. But every single cottage that we passed had a name. I thought, that's interesting, but then quickly forgot about it as I decided to go mountain biking or hiking or what else did we do? It doesn't matter what we were doing. We're talking about houses. Let's fast forward a couple of years to my next trip into the French countryside. Again, I noticed different town, different county, same tradition. Houses had names. It really confused me, especially when I went to visit some family in Ireland and noticed, lo and behold, houses had names. So what was going on? Two different locations in one country, two different countries in the world, all had these naming ideas. It was wild. I had no idea what was going on, and I was intrigued. So it got me thinking, is this cultural? And in a weird way, yeah, it's cultural. So it turns out that this tradition of naming houses and giving them personalities actually comes from rural England, of all places. So you see, in rural England, before postmasters had postal addresses, before postal addresses existed, cottages, houses, lands were given names. This was so the people who ran the post had the ability to go and deliver the letters, parcels, packages to the people who were the right recipients. This naming tradition continued all over Western Europe, in the most rural, out in the boony areas. And if you've ever been to the remote areas of America, you'll notice a lot of those names, especially on the East Coast, have the same naming tradition. And that's because all the people who migrated over from countries that had this naming tradition brought it with them. So if you're ever in Appalachia, you're going to notice names on houses sometimes. If you're in the French countryside, the Irish countryside, English, Welsh, Scottish, all over Western Europe, even places up in Switzerland, I noticed, you're going to notice houses with names. And that is where it came from. But is there something deeper? Is there something more interesting, more magical behind the naming of a house? Well, according to some articles that I found, The naming tradition actually goes to folk magics. You see, in the folk magic traditions of heathenry and Celtic magic and things like that, you talk a lot with the land spirits. The land spirits are those that protect and understand your home and keep it safe and keep your possessions safe. And you don't want to do anything to upset the land spirits, but you also want to be very clear, or else they might take it upon themselves to act out certain ways, if you will. Well, the naming tradition of naming your property actually goes to the magical spells themselves. You see, when you are talking about your house and you're wanting it to be protected, it's easier to give it a name. Thus, when you're talking to the land spirits, to the house spirits, they know exactly what you're talking about, and there's no room for a misunderstanding or a mishap. So it's a lot easier to say White House than it is to say that 2-story house on the edge of the woods that's painted white. A single name makes this magic and spirit flow. Now, that sounds a little weird. It sounds a little woo-woo, a little out there, right? But deep down into it, I found another article that was talking about folk and magic traditions about naming their house. And it was talking about building a relationship with your dwelling. You see, we live in houses. We live surrounded by walls and ceilings and all of this. And I appreciate the coverage. But I never thought of a house as a friend. By giving it a name, you build a relationship with it. And by building a relationship with it, you tend to care for it more. Think about when you were younger. Did you ever have a car and you loved the car so much you gave it a name, and that name all of a sudden turned it into, this car has a personality. You know, if I let the clutch out a little too slow, it shudders, it quakes with excitement, that type of thing. Well, giving your house a name is the same idea. You start to build a relationship with it, and that relationship gets built up for both of you. Eventually, your house has personality. It has ideas, it has ideals, it has wishes and wants, and you build up this relationship that eventually the house becomes a member of your family and not just a place to rest your head at night. So while I was researching this video, I came across a blog that was talking about how to name your house, different questions to ask yourself. And so we're going to go through these, and I think they're pretty good. So the first question that it asked is, what do you love most about this house? Are there any wild animals or animals that frequent the area that you could give it a name after? How does the house feel to you? And are there any strange physical aspects about the landscape or any prominent parts of the landscape that you can incorporate into the naming? So my family and I, we were sitting down, we were going through this blog, and we were going, oh, what's a name for the house? What's a name for the house? What's a name for the house? Eventually we decided on squirrelwood, as our garden has these beautiful trees that attract families of squirrels, and it just, as soon as we said it out loud, this house felt more alive. It felt more a friend than a shelter. And as I say that, I actually kind of want to go and hang out with my new friend. So I wish that I could invite you, but we'll catch you next time.